but I see BLG in the green room.
Let's get BLG. Let's go to Brandon Lee Gowton of Bleeding Green Nation. Bring him up now. BLG, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Thursday practice squad day?
Doing good, guys. 8 days until the first game.
Yeah, week from tomorrow. We're getting close. I'll start it since it was practice squad day yesterday, BLG. And you've been doing this for a long time now. It's like everybody forgets from year to year. Like, it's not that big of a deal. This year, 26 players claimed on waivers. That's it. That's it. But next year, you'll go through the same thing. Oh, the Eagles are they got to keep this. They got to keep. No, they don't. Why do you think it is that way?
I think it was 26 out of 1,184 who were, and trimmed down from 90 to 53. So if you're doing the math at home, I think that's like 2.2% of the players who are cut. So yeah, it is not quite the case where you really have to sweat out losing someone. I mean, maybe the exception, and okay, if that's the case.
Every once in a while, in general, it seemed like Carolina, the Eagles were probably right to keep Eli Ricks because it seemed like Carolina was taking up every corner available, and maybe he gets clean. But even Eli, I mean, boy, a lot of things are going to have to go wrong for Eli Ricks to get on the field this year for the Eagles. So yeah, the waiver wire is one of those things where, boy, everybody gets fired up about it every year, and it's just not that big of a deal. It just isn't.
Yeah, it is kind of a funny time of year that we go through here with the 53-man roster and the practice squad and everything, because, I mean, it kind of does matter in the sense that, look at Thomas Booker. He made it last year. I was on the Eagles practice squad all year last year. Now he's on the roster. Now he might actually be able to contribute. We'll see. So, it matters more than not at all, but also at the same time.
No, I agree. And Howie he gave a little shout out to Connor Barwin. Who is now heading the developmental program, because it's not only Thomas Booker, it's Tristan McCullum, it's Ben Van Sumeren. So I think when you talk about the young guys that have put on the practice squad, whether it's Gabe Hall or EJ Jenkins or Dylan McMahon or the new guy, Brandon Smith as a player, I think has some upside. Even Caden Stearns as an injured guy trying to make it back. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important. The developmental part of it, I think, is very important for the practice squad. And I think the Eagles have proven they're pretty good at that.
For sure. But at the same time, it's just like none of this really matters in terms of the 8 days away.
No.
No. Yeah, that's the kind of the funny part. It's like, all right, gearing up for the season, all the focus is on this kind of minutia for a little bit, but then obviously it's
exactly. Well,
the real game.
But it is different from the standpoint of Nick Gates being the perfect example. Like, evidently, Adam Schefter reported he's already been promised he's going to be elevated for week 1. That's sort of the strategy. And by the way, that blew me up in the beat writer school because I had Nick making the team. And that's sort of the strategy and how we got to keep somebody else and do the wink deal with Nick Gates. But he's going to be the more important as a game day backup than, maybe Darian Kennard, as an example. It's a little bit more interesting, I guess, from a strategy standpoint, by liberalizing the roster roles. So, like, is Gates and Jack Stoll more important than Darian Kennard and Jelix Hunt for Green Bay?
Right. Yeah. Maybe. I think another funny thing to the Gates thing is because Washington is still on the hook for his salary or some of it this year.
Nice little jab at Josh Harris.
This is like elite level GMing here from Howie, where it's like, now he's making the Commanders pay at least 3 extra weeks, probably, if they want to eventually add him to the roster after his elevations are up and then sign him. But
That's
make the Commanders the Commanders pay him right now until then.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point as well. That's an extra part of it. Roster as a whole, though, initial 53. Now we know, and I'm glad we got you on today because Howie and he was right. When you talk after it's not complete, I think he used the term incomplete, and everybody's like, only 2 tight ends, no backup center. So now that you know the plans for backup tight end and backup center, what are your concerns with this roster, most notably?
Yeah, I do like how they handled those. I feel comfortable with those spots. I think getting Jack Stoll, that I think I've been, if I didn't talk about it here, I've been talking about it elsewhere where, he looked like he was going to be on the outs with the Giants.
Yeah.
And, he was your second tight end last year, and now he's your third tight end. So that seems pretty reasonable. And then to have Gates in there, who I thought, kind of came on nicely after the Eagles signed him a bit later into camp. It's a good question. I think, the pass rush is still like a question mark in terms of not having that dominant player other than Jalen Carter, but more so, talking about the edge rusher position. And it seems like the Eagles' messaging and what they seem to believe with their actions is that's kind of going to be more of like a unit, like the pass rush coming together as a unit than it is that one star player dominating from there. I think that stands out as one of the areas that is both important to the team. It's really on the trenches on both sides. I really think those are the most important areas to the team, and I don't think they're as good at those spots as they've been in years past.
BLG, I want to ask you about the trade last week. We haven't had you on since then, so just we'll get back into the 53. But what do you think of the trade for Jahan Dotson, a third rounder? I thought was a little steep, but what do you think he can be for this team? How much does he open up the offense? How much of an impact will he have here in Philly?
Yeah, I mean, I like the move. I don't know if I love the move. I think it was worth making. It's not. I think the value is fair and fine. I do wonder, if the perception of Jahan Dotson might be better than the reality of Jahan Dotson. In part, and I maybe this is as simple as the Commanders don't know what they're doing once again, and they're dumb, and this was a bad move for them. But when I try to look at it from the Commanders' perspective, like, why are they getting rid of this guy? Doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense, unless maybe they trade for Ayuk, and that would kind of make more sense eventually. But I mean, to give up on a guy this young when you don't have much at that position and you're trying to help your own young quarterback in Washington, that kind of just raises a red flag for me. It makes me wonder, okay, why were the Commanders willing to give up on this guy? Had a really, I think he looked good in his rookie season, took a step back last year. I'm okay with the bet the Eagles are making here. And I think there's certainly something to be said for taking off the pressure of, as a former first round pick in Washington, where now he's just going to be expected to be the third wide receiver here. So I like it, but to me, it's not like A+ Howie season, how he swindled the Commanders. I just kind of wonder, like, okay, what if there's something here we don't really realize?
I think it's another good, and I think from Washington's perspective, I think people got to get used to they're not dumb anymore. I think Adam Peters is going to be a good GM, and I think Dan Quinn's going to be at least a solid and head coach. And there's a lot of changes there, and the changes, those guys didn't draft Jahan Dotson, so they don't have the history with him. So they're like, all right, we don't want him, we don't need him. And I look at it from that perspective, BLG, is nobody else was going to give him a third round pick for Jahan Dotson. So from their perspective, I think it was a good deal. From the Eagles' perspective, I also think it's a good deal because the Eagles are in a position where the Super Bowl window is open. And I know everybody wants winners and losers, but I think that it made sense for both sides. I really believe that. And we were just talking about the first round pick tag, because people here, a bunch of people, I'm sure you get it at Bleeding Green as well. A bunch of people are calling Nolan Smith a bust. And he can't do this. He can't do. It's one season where he had a shoulder injury. I mean, let's give the guy a chance. And that's the same with Washington with Jahan Dotson, as you brought up. He's a first round pick here, there. Nobody cares about that here, and they're all fired up about him. It's an interesting sort of thought experiment. When you put that first round tag on people in their cities, it is a really difficult expectation to deal with. And if they leave, everybody gets excited. Everybody's excited about Jahan Dotson in a new city. So I like your thought about the perception greater than the reality. Eagles fans think they're getting the 16th overall pick in the draft. I'm not sure. I think he was a little bit overdrafted, BLG. Fair or unfair?
I think fair, and also kind of funny to consider how one of the reasons the Commanders are giving up on him is apparently they feel good about the guy who was Eagles wide receiver 4 last year. Yeah, Alameda Zaccheaus. Like it's kind of funny and kind of a little weird to think about that. It's like, okay, not that it was as simple, I guess, for the Eagles as just to re-sign him, but like it is kind of funny how the Commanders seem to like him, and is part of the reason why Dotson is here. I mean, you're talking about the perception of the first round thing. That was always something with Derek Barnett and I think Josh Sweat and obviously Sweat turned out to be the superior player. But I think always that perception because Barnett was drafted high and Sweat was drafted later, even if there was a point earlier in their careers where I think it was a lot closer and everyone would probably, think much more favorably of Josh Sweat just because of, the virtue of the draft position and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, again, I think Dotson will help. I like the move. Obviously, they had to do something because they had no real clear answer there at wide receiver 3. Paris Campbell wasn't able to really do much, wasn't able to stay healthy. John Ross, same thing. And, Britton Covey, I think, is a nice guy to have around as a fourth receiver, possession kind of guy, not someone you're going to trust to play on the outside, obviously. And then Johnny Wilson just, I don't think, showed enough to be, trusted to play a whole lot right away as a rookie. So I think they kind of had to make a move. And I like the move. I don't necessarily love the move.
By the way, just as a quick follow-up, because she brought up Paris Campbell. Now, we're just over a week away. Nick Gates is going to be one guy elevated. We know that. Who's number 2? Is it going to be Paris Campbell or is it going to be Jack Stoll? Because the hot Dotson might not be ready for a full complement. But they'll probably throw him out there. I would think it would be more Stoll than Paris Campbell, but it's interesting. Yeah. Is that the way you would go?
Yeah, I wonder if like Covey might, have more of a role than he will then moving forward, just because, of what you mentioned there. I'm sure Dotson will be that guy anyway, but maybe there's just a little bit of a learning curve where they would want to, not put too much on his plate right at the jump in week 1. But yeah, I think it'll be Stoll because I think they want to have the ability to, run 12 if they want to, or just, also just needing that body maybe for special teams. And they clearly have liked Stoll's run blocking in the past. Of course, that was under Nick Sirianni having more control over the offense. So we'll see. But yeah, I think Campbell will be more of a break glass in case of emergency.
Any moves on the 53-man roster, BLG, that you did not like that stuck out to you that were things you didn't understand or just didn't like on the 53?
Hard to say with the context of getting Dylan McMahon back on the practice squad.
Right.
Like obviously Howie had a good enough read on that. I still think you can criticize that or say that's probably maybe not a guy you should be even risking losing. Like last year, for example, the Eagles didn't lose Britton Covey, but they could have misread that. Yeah. And that would have been a joke because he's the best punt returner in the NFL. And to just cut him when you probably could have, kept him otherwise. The
Christian Ellis, it didn't work.
Exactly.
They tried to get Christian Ellis through waivers.
And on Christian Ellis, a guy they kept around instead, Albert O. Why are they using one of these?
I can't figure that out, man. BLG, I can't figure that out.
It is hard to believe. We haven't seen him do anything since he's gotten here. We've seen him actually sometimes get open and Jalen Hurts not want to throw to him at all. So Jalen Hurts clearly doesn't trust in him. He doesn't play special teams, which is what a backup tight end needs to do. I really struggle to understand why you would use one of those spots on Albert O. That just doesn't really make sense to me. The Eagles seem to love him a lot more than everyone else.
Yeah. Well, that to me, and we were talking about this, a couple of us down at NovaCare, and it's like, all right, you have this new rule where you can put guys on injured reserve before the cut to 53. And I asked Howie about that. I'm like, did it change your strategy at all? He's not going to admit they're not injured in Anias's case. Mm-hmm. But he did mention that they were probably going to keep those guys. He intimated they were going to keep those guys. So he's saying they would have kept Albert if he wasn't hurt. because Albert's legitimately hurt. At least I don't know if Anias is or isn't. Anytime you have a football player, it's probably something banged up that you can, blow out of proportion. But Albert's legitimately hurt, had core muscle surgery, but he said essentially he was going to keep him. I've seen nothing from Albert Guegbanon. Good guy, but I mean, and he gave up. Everybody points to the trade and the ego, but really he only gave up draft. I think he gave up 20, 30 spots in draft positioning. Really? Is he just keeping him around for ego?
I don't. There's really no great way to explain it other than like Matt Russell, who's in the Eagles front office, I guess, who was with the Broncos when he was drafted. I guess maybe it's him who like really loves him a lot. But
speaking of Matt Russell, remember, was it his nephew that was here, Brady Russell?
Brady Russell last year, yeah.
And he's stuck with, I don't know if he's still on, I think, the Seahawks, but he's stuck with the Seahawks. And he was somebody like, why aren't you keeping your nephew?
fair
he's still on the Seahawks.
Maybe he loves Albert O more than his own nephew.
Nothing about it makes sense. Nothing about it makes sense, BG.
No, nothing.
Yeah, enough about the Albert O tangent, but it is one of the more strange. One of the interesting give and takes, and I don't think there were many of them, because Howie pretty much consistently said, I wish I could talk to you tomorrow. And by the way, he could, BLG. I love that. He can talk to us whenever he wants.
He's being held against his will.
Yeah. But you had that little back and forth with him and Nick, admitting they have different jobs, which I thought was interesting. And they do. And Howie's got to think more about the future as well as right now. And Nick admitted, like all the coaches, he threw Jeremiah Washburn under, like he wants to keep everybody at his particular position. I thought that was interesting. Do you think the Eagles handled that fence and straddled that fence well? Or is it, Super Bowl or bust? We shouldn't be worried about prospects. You think about it from a baseball standpoint all the time. Everybody, they never turn out. Take the proven option. Is that the same for you in football or a little bit different?
I mean, in this case, it's hard. Like they didn't lose anyone, right? So other than like maybe you could argue like, okay, Julian Okwara, like, that was a player that could have been nice to have if the Cardinals, didn't scoop him up. But I mean, they already have 6 edge rushers on the roster. And Patrick Johnson had a good summer. I think it's fair to have kept him over Okwara. There's not really too much I can quibble about. And I do think it's important to have an eye on the future, especially because like, it's a 46 game day roster. So, right. Or 47 if you have the extra offensive linemen. So, a lot of these guys, or some of these guys just might be healthy scratches all year anyway. Glorified practice squad members. And I think, there's strategy there and maintaining those players and having an eye on next year. And it's a fine line and you have to balance it. And I think there's a way to do that in a way that also can potentially make sense for this year. If all of a sudden you get thin at a certain spot, wouldn't be ideal that you might have to play a really young player, but sometimes that's how young players get better, is that you have to play them and force them into action, maybe sometimes sooner than you would ideally like to do so. So, I would not really, there's nothing too much I can really crush the Eagles for here, Albert O thing aside.
BLJ, what do you think about the depth at the edge rusher position? A lot of fans in our chat, a lot of fans in our comment section have been talking about it for quite a bit of time now. I said to John earlier in the show, you could argue from 3 to 6 with BG, Jalix Hunt, Nolan Smith, and Patrick Johnson. Any given one of those guys could contribute as the 3rd best edge rusher on any given Sunday, depending on, what's going on. What do you think of the depth at the edge rusher position?
I mean, I think it should be Brandon Graham. He looks like he can still play to me based on what we saw.
He is 35 though, so my projection would be like if something happened, any given one of those guys could be the top guy that day.
That's the question. Like, how much can he handle? But at the same time, and John said this, I think, when we were talking earlier this year, just last year, time to empty the tank.
Empty it. That's
John's
what I
been saying that for a while. Yep.
And so I absolutely subscribe to that. No, obviously you want to keep him, fresh or relatively like, you don't want to burn him out early in the season. You want to have him play, maybe really the time to empty the tank is later in the year, when especially make the playoffs and everything. But yeah, I mean, I think it should be a top 3 of Huff, Sweat, and Graham there. And then beyond that, like, I don't know, because
I think it might be Patrick. I think Patrick is the 4th best edge rusher on this team.
He seems to be the most like if it's a truly a meritocracy, which it is very much not always that. Yeah. I would say he has the strongest case to be playing over Nolan Smith. And Jalen Hunt is a rookie he's still dealing with that oblique injury, so we'll see what his timeline is here. But yeah, I think at least to start it should be Patrick Johnson. I agree.
Speaking of oblique injuries, it's a little bit bleak on Dallas Goedert. He was not practicing yesterday. That is an injury. There's different levels, obviously, but boy, could they be without Dallas Goedert week 1 against the Green Bay Packers? And then you got to do some roster manipulation. You probably got to put Stoll on the roster immediately. Boy, we won't get a real injury report till, I don't even know when they're going to practice. I guess Sunday, Monday, they're going to practice. Such a goopy Friday game, week 1. So, yeah, I think they're going to practice Sunday, Monday, and we'll get a better indication. But, boy, he had the baseball cap on. I mean, he doesn't look in any discomfort, but that's got to be a little bit of a concern with Dallas Goedert week 1, I would think. A little bit of uncertainty. How concerning is that for you?
Yeah, I mean, seeing that he wasn't there, the reports that he wasn't there, like, okay, we're getting close to a week out. That's not the best feeling. I do agree with you. Even looking at him on the last day of camp, where he missed, I think the first day he missed that practice, he seemed to be moving around well for whatever that's worth.
Yeah.
But and also, I guess if you're looking for the optimistic side here, maybe the fact that the Eagles only did keep 2 tight ends on the 53 signals that they're not like, super concerned about this, at least in the short term here. So I'm going to just take it that he'll be okay to play. And, they didn't do anything more serious at tight end that would signify that, like,
that's okay. A good point. That's a good point. You would think if they were concerned, certainly long-term, multiple week concern, that they would have done something else. All right. So you calmed me down there. Good job, BLG, from that perspective. But yeah, I did see Dallas yesterday. He was not practicing. And he's not the guy that you're worried about that needs a full week of practice. If he's healthy, he can go out there and do it. I'm sure we talked about it, but I want to bring it up again. I think this week 1 game in Brazil is awful for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is a potential significant NFC contender with Green Bay. It's a game that you would have had at Lincoln Financial Field, obviously, and their GM has already spoke about this. He's like, he's not in love with going to Brazil either, but he said, at least we don't have to play in Philly, essentially. If the Eagles and Packers are fighting for home field advantage down the stretch, which is a big possibility, and they lose this game on a neutral field, I'm surprised Jeffrey Lurie didn't push back on this. I'm really surprised, or at least, I think he's more open that the league as a businessman wants to grow internationally. But if I were Jeffrey Lurie, I would have pushed for Cleveland.
Yeah,
you never want to lose any game, but all right, AFC foe, not as big as it is. Green Bay giving up that game against a significant contender on paper. I don't like it. I don't like it, BLG.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a fair gripe if you're an Eagles fan and or part of the organization, like you just mentioned. Yeah, the fact that it could have been and seemed to be, at least based on some of the leaks that happened at first, that it was going to be the Browns. Yeah, I think that's a key difference in terms of you lost the ability to get, have this home field advantage that you were supposed to have over this team that could then be incredibly meaningful when it comes to the playoff seeding later down the line. So, and it's for what? It's like this novelty of a thing where the Eagles are playing, in a different country. So yeah, I think that's a fair gripe coming from the Eagles side, and it is an advantage in the Packers' favor, or at the very least, it is a neutralized advantage for the Eagles, and takes away their ability to have that edge. Yeah, I think it's tough. Obviously, you get the advantage potentially if you consider that of the rest on the back end coming off of the Friday to the next Monday against the Falcons, but also part of that is there's travel baked in, and that could kind of disrupt their schedule.
You think the NFL overruled? Because, John, you keep bringing up Lurie. I would imagine Lurie argued that he didn't want the Packers. And I wonder if the NFL was just like, no, we want the better matchup in the NFC on that Friday night. It's a primetime game. It's opening week. You think the NFL might have just kind of squashed any Jeffrey Lurie input on that?
I guess, like John said, I think Lurie does care about the international market. He's talked about that in the past.
Yeah, he does for sure.
And I think there's probably something to be said too for, it's not just another Europe game. It's like the first game in South America. There's like that, allure of like, hey, this is, and it's on a Friday. It's very, not that I think Jeffrey Lurie by any means is like Jerry Jones when it comes to caring about like being in the spotlight. But, when you're a billionaire owner and, you have this team that you want to show off, I'm sure, that there is value in that. But
no doubt.
Yeah, so I would guess he's more, focused on that part and cares more about that ultimately. But yeah, I mean, I think, and there's only so much you can do anyway.
Yeah. And if they win the game, none of this matters. So win the game, Eagles, and none of it matters. And then you have, but Green Bay potentially is going to be a very good team. And it is an interesting matchup, certainly, from the league's perspective, two high-profile teams going about it early in the season, second game of the season, first game. So I get it from the league's perspective. I just think it's not a good thing from an Eagles perspective. But they can quell all that talk by just winning the football game. And BLG back, since we'll finish it off with the roster at least, and make sure you follow Brandon on the X platform at Brandon Gowton. You can read him at Bleeding Green Nation, does a tremendous job there. If you looked at this team, and I've been saying this for the past couple of weeks, I may have mentioned it to you in the past. Obviously, the strength is the offense, right? I mean, this is the best offense on paper, maybe ever, for the Eagles, if you think about it. Playmakers all over the place, franchise quarterback, top 5 offensive line, on paper, off the charts. Defensively, I think it's going to be better, growing unit. However, depth-wise, I think they have more depth on defense than offense. Agree or disagree?
I mean, inarguably, in terms of the bodies on they have 28 defenders to 22 offensive players, and last year on the initial roster was actually 24 to 27. So that disparity has grown a little bit there. Yeah, I think that's safe to say. I think like the offense is more top heavy, where you have like the high end talent at these positions, whereas the depth not so much, and then the defense a little bit more of the opposite case, where I think kind of like Jalen Carter aside, maybe you want to argue Darius Slay too, they don't quite have as much of that high end talent. And I think the linebacker position is like a perfect example of that. Like I don't think it's about anyone feeling amazing about the Eagles' top linebacker option, whoever that even is, and whoever it will be the linebacker.
I've been saying this for weeks, but you could bring Oren Burks up from the practice squad, and I think you're going to get comparable play.
Right. And like you said, Brandon Smith makes this roster on many years past where the Eagles don't have as much like baseline competency at linebacker.
I do think Nakobe can take the next step, though. I think Nakobe could be the guy that's above the rest. Everybody else, I think you can mix and match and you'd be fine. I really believe that. And including Brandon Smith. I think he was one of the I think you came up. I loved your thought process on the best player with no shot to make the team. I think you described
right.
it.
Yeah.
I love that category. I went Perry Nickerson. I think you went Brandon Smith, right?
I did. Yeah. I like a Brandon Smith. He showed me a little something last year when they had to play him, and he looked good on the special teams unit.
Yeah. I love the category. I like the player. He's so big, so athletic, so lengthy. I think that was part of the problem. I think you look at him and say, well, he's an edge rusher. It kind of that Zach Bond a little bit. Is he an edge rusher? Is he an off-ball linebacker? But I think he's worth working with. And yeah, I'm very comfortable with the Eagles' depth at linebacker. When's the last time you could say that?
Famous last words. I feel like, I agree, but also in years past, it's been like, oh, this unit's not great. They're not maybe even good, but they're definitely better than the Drek that they had last year. So there is the danger of that. But based on, again, what we saw in training camp, I mean, all the linebackers played relatively well. No one had a camp other than, I think, Nakobe, had a tough start. He rebounded from that, but no one had any kind of camp where you're like, ugh. Like this is kind of looking bleak here. Certainly, like it did last year when Nicholas Moreau was supposed to be. He was the first guy up the first team defense, and he didn't even make the initial 53-man roster. He was getting beat.
I got a kick out of Ben Van Sumeren was talking yesterday, BLG, and a bunch of guys, understandably, it's cut down day, and they're asking him, "What were you doing on cut down day?" And he was like, "Nothing." He knew he made the team. And wasn't concerned about it at all. And it probably got the heads up from the coaching staff that, you're making the team. And I think that surprised a lot of people. But even he played well. Trotter very well as a rookie. As you mentioned, Nakobe coming back, Zach Bond, Devin White. Yeah, I don't know if anybody's going to be great, but I don't think anybody's going to be terrible. Even if you need to go down to Trot and Ben, to be honest, that's better than usual.
And I do think you kind of talked about mix and matching. I mean, I think that's what could happen here still. Like, I don't think it's done and dusted that it's just two guys the whole time, the whole season. I think it's kind of an evolving situation there. Yeah.
And it's a better situation. And Vic will help as well. I think Vic Fangio will certainly help the defense as a whole. At Brandon Gowton does a tremendous job at bleedinggreennation.com. You can check him out there. All his coverage of the cut down, the practice squad, everything going on with the Philadelphia Eagles. Does a tremendous job with us and everywhere else you see him. Podcasting legend.
He's all over the place, BLG. He's everywhere.
Yeah. And he's tall. He's Fred Johnson level tall.
Oh, even taller. Yeah, even taller.
Even tall. Yeah, you're taller than Fred.
Don't sell me short.
Did you see the picture I got of Fred and Isaiah Rodgers yesterday from practice?
Yes. Yeah.
Isaiah was waving hello, but the size difference is unbelievable. Everybody should check that out. Just sized it.
BLG, what's the official ruling? Is it 6'10"?
6'9".
6'9". Nice.
6'9". Fred's only like 6'7". You got him beat.
You only got
everyone on the roster beat.
Yeah.
Jordan. Yeah. Makai's only not quite 6'8". Jordan's 6'8", I guess.
Yeah. You guess you'd have to go to the NBA, BLG, to get topped out.
That's right.
I think Makai looks bigger than Jordan.
I agree. But I think that's like Jordan's not. He's not 6'8" then. Like I don't think it's Makai is actually 6'9". Because I think again I'm still above Makai. So I think it's kind of like Jordan might be like 6'7". Becton might be 6'8".
Yeah.
All right. BLG, thanks for joining the show, man. One of our viewers today dubbed you as the best mustache on YouTube.
Oh, wow. You're getting a lot of love.
That was the dubbing today from one of our guys.
They haven't seen Grant Calcaterra's mustache.
I don't know, man. BLJ might not only be taller than Grant Calcaterra, but he might have him beat in the mustache game.
I'll tell you
high praise.
the
Thank
confidence
whoever
that
that
the
was.
mustache has given Grant Calcaterra. I mean,
I'm
There's a lot of
sensing the
power.
same confidence from BLG, John, and all his off-season reports. He's taking it to a new level with the mustache.
all right.
All right,
Thanks,
BLG.
guys.
Thanks for joining, man. We'll talk to you next week, all right, brother?
Take it.
See you.
Thanks, bud.
There's BLG joining us on Birds 365. Great stuff from BLG. Just about 5 minutes left to go here on the show today. Johnny Mac, a good show today. A lot of good viewers in here. 137 likes. Can we get 13 more likes in the last 5 minutes? If you guys enjoyed the show, definitely hit that like button as it helps us grow.
By the way, real quick.
Yep, go for it.
As some of the Tom Pelissero reports, that the most popular player on waivers was cornerback Shamar Bartholomew, but Sam Womack, another cornerback, it was claimed by 3 teams. The Colts were awarded him over the Chiefs and the Eagles. So the Eagles put in a waiver claim on Sam Womack, another cornerback, which tells you how much, but probably has more to do with special teams. But anyway, they did put in at least one claim. They did not get Sam Womack. There you have it.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. What's your final takeaways today, man, on the show? With it was the practice squad episode today, Johnny Mac. Nothing really crazy, not much to talk about with it, as much as we would like to kick it around for hours on end. They added the receiver from Georgia. They brought back Jack Stoll, and the rest are exactly as we projected they would do, basically. But any final thoughts on today's Thursday edition of Birds 365?
We're getting close. That's my final thought. I hadn't realized you get focused on the minute and all the cuts and all. It's a very busy week for us. But, boy, they're going to be playing football a week from tomorrow. So things got to settle down. They got to get in the preparation mode quickly. And they will do so. It's kind of a crazy week from that perspective. Labor Day coming up. Eagles are going to have to work on Labor Day, obviously. And hey, season is here. Good to get here. Center cleared up, tight end cleared up, and we'll see how things shake out.
Good stuff, Johnny Mac. Let me make sure I got everybody up to 149 likes. So thanks, everybody, for getting us close to 150. I think we'll hit it in the next 3 minutes. So thank you guys all for being here. Johnny Mac, I thought we had a pretty good show today. We'll have a good show planned tomorrow. Damo, I would project, would be here in the morning.
Yeah, I got to check and try to get our Ed Kratz if he can do Friday as well. So hopefully we'll have those guys for you, barring any unforeseen circumstances. But we'll be back either way. And I got to get out of here. I got to run down to the NovaCare complex.
All right, we're going to get out of here a couple minutes early. Get John a couple minutes on the road. 2 minutes on the road now. Getting on the road early saves you 6 minutes in traffic as it continues to build up. So we'll get out of here. John, great show today. Thank you all in the chat for hitting that like button up to 153. We'll catch you tomorrow on Birds 365. Johnny Mac, good show, man.
All right, thanks, everybody.